little bit about the present and things that we can do to prepare to reopen, and things for the future about how we can look beyond just reopening and how we can come out winning. What I'd like you to think about before we start is this quote from Richard Branson. So don't just take notes for the sake of taking notes. I would urge you to take notes, but put them down and then afterwards go through your ideas, turn them into actionable and measurable goals. And I'm hoping that some of the things that I say here stimulate your minds and stimulate ideas of your own. So I can just share what I'm doing and what our team is doing, but there's loads of things that you can do and that you can take from this. So let's start with the past. How did we get to where we are? And I'm just going to go very quickly through some lessons learned over the several decades that I've had in aesthetics and building businesses. So if we go back to the 1980s, I was nursing as a dermatology nurse in a dermatology unit at Charing Cross Hospital. I left there because I had a fascination in skin health rather than in skin disease, although of course I'm still fascinated in skin disease. That took me to a role in the early 1990s with the Collagen Corporation, and that was before there were fillers that were made from hyaluronic acid, before there were toxins, and really our skincare delivery, there was really very, very little. But I was invited by Professional Beauty, which was one of the first aesthetic conferences, to give a presentation on what was then known as medico beauty treatments, the new business opportunity. And the green square or oblong that you can see on the right hand side is actually one of the slides from that period of time. So that was in a slide carousel. None of these Zoom or Teams meetings were available at that point. The other things that were interesting at that point, apart from the fact that there were only collagen fillers up until 1996, was that 1 ml of treatment was £275 as an average cost out there. And I think it's really interesting to see that virtually nothing has changed in terms of cost of fillers. If anything, there's been a downwards price pressure since then. The next big presentation that I put together in a moment of context, which I think is worth touching on, is 2008, by which time I had built up the Bose clinics, successfully sold it to a group called Collagenics, and had a couple of different roles in the aesthetic industry, not least working for QMed, now Galderma, teaching advanced dermal fillers around Europe. And interestingly, the link there is that a lot of the European distributors of Restylane at that point were also co-marketing Neostrata, and that's where I started to develop my real passion for the science and clinical evidence behind the Neostrata brand. And at that point, I gave a presentation which was titled The 15-Year Patient. Obviously, the reason for that is that I had a patient who had been doing aesthetic procedures on for 15 years. And I then updated the presentation regularly between 2008 and 2013, at which point it became the 20-year patient. And at that point, I actually referred the patient on to somebody else because I'd got so busy with AestheticSource that really I'd started to slow down my aesthetic practice to the point where it wasn't relevant for me to be looking after this patient. We remain very solid friends. So I'm going to touch on some of the things that were in that presentation. So this is from 2013, and this is Klein data on the European sales of skincare. So in 2013, moisturizers were selling 217 million euros in Europe, and it had gone up a little bit from 2012. And obviously this data is old because the presentation is old, but not an awful lot has changed. So looking at the most relevant recent Klein data, these splits between the different treatments that we can perform with skincare really hasn't changed. So moisturizers in the front, hand and body just behind it, and speciality treatments, which is where we can really make a difference. A huge volume of sales for speciality treatments. And if we then look at the areas of treatment as opposed to the type of products, anti-aging right out there in front with 300 million euros being spent back 7 years ago. And dehydrated skin just a little bit below that at nearly 200 million euros being spent. So massive, massive potential for us all to reach our consumers by educating them that we have treatments and products that can really benefit their skins. Looking further into that data, the key products and trends and launches at that period of time were masks and peels. Now that's music to my ears because obviously we were around at that time and we saw a significant growth and continue to see a significant growth in consumer demand for peels and masks. For highly targeted treatments, things like pigmentation in the eye area, lip treatments, and a very, very strong ingredient focus, which I have seen in my time with AestheticSource. The consumer wants more and more data. They want to be able to trust the data because they're just surrounded with adverts that promise them the world, as we all know. A focus on